translation and find English if speaker is using Ukrainian language. We can test. I will speak Ukrainian. Шановні колеги, я думаю, що ми можемо починати. 11 година. Все, як ми з вами планували. Дякую, що знайшли можливості приєднатися в такі тяжкі часи. Ми вже обговорювали, що наразі навіть онлайн підключення було під певним питанням, чи вистачить батарей, чи буде інтернет. Але дякую. Сьогодні відкривається щорічна конференція Української національної платформи форуму громадянського суспільства східного партнерства. З чим я вітаю колег по платформі. Це дійсно знакова подія, бо попри всі складні частини і нерозуміння, можливо, до кінця концепції східного партнерства, що далі з ним робити, якраз громадянський вимір, він діє, і це є великим плюсом, як на мене. Сьогодні ми відкриваємо конференцію публічну дискусію, яка називається «Європейська інтеграція і війна. Виклики для громадянського суспільства України». І нагадаю відразу, що цей захід проводиться в рамках проєкту підтримки діяльності Української національної платформи форуму громадянського суспільства східного партнерства з 2021-2023 роках, що фінансується Європейським Союзом та виконується Інститутом економічних досліджень та політичних консультацій. За що окремо велика дяка партнерам із інституту, бо насправді це велика і тяжка ноша тримати цю коаліцію дієву, і вітання, що це вдалося. Мене звати Надій Максак, я є членом платформи і представляю організацію «Українська призма». Сьогодні маю за честь модерувати нашу дискусію. І для початку таких декілька важливих моментів технічних. Як я вже говорив, є переклад. Ви можете ним скористатися, якщо є в цьому необхідність. І друге, про що мене просили, власне, організатори, це повідомити, власне, тримати жорстко верхню рамку нашої дискусії, щоб ми закінчили рівно о 1-й годині, бо це пов'язано з певними, знову ж таки, технічними питаннями, на які ми мусимо зважати. Отже, вітаю всіх колег, і я думаю, що ми можемо почати нашу конференцію. І, звичайно, я надаю слово для привітання члену керівного комітету Української національної платформи Івану Кульчицькому. Іван Івановичу, прошу вас до слова.
Дякую, Геннадію. Дякую колегам, що довірили мені сказати пару вступних слів. Всі ми зараз знаємо, в якому зараз ситуація, наскільки недавно закінчилась тривога по всій Україні, і Україна є в фокусі світової політики, йде війна, і Росія на нас напала, але в нас немає сумнівів, що Україна переможе. Звичайно, ми очікуємо більше допомоги від партнерів і Європейського Союзу, і США, тому чим більше буде допомоги, тим швидше завершиться війна, буде менше руйнувань і, що важливо, буде менше жертв. І ми також віримо в те, що Україна буде відбудовуватися, розвиватися на нових засадах, особливо в тому аспекті, що ми бачимо, особливо представники громадянського суспільства, що ми бачимо Україну як члена Європейського Союзу, і під тим кутом ми зараз дивимося на всі євроінтеграційні процеси, на процеси реформ. І ми, звичайно, в середовищі громадянського суспільства і в нашій платформі багато дискутували про інструменти, про форми, про тих конкретні підходи, але спільне бачення завжди було одне, що ми бачили Україну як члена сім'ї європейських країн, як члена ЄС, і ми могли тільки дискутувати, як швидко, яким чином, хто, як робить, що можна було би зробити. І, власне, під тим кутом ми також дивилися на інструменти східного партнерства. Ми зараз бачимо по багатьох програмах ЄС, Горизонт Європа, інші. Україна зараз приєднується до багатьох нових програм, Health, Life, і це все розвивається. І ми бачимо, що Європа допомагає в рамках діючих програм уже нам. Але ми також розуміємо, що ця допомога могла б бути більша, і ми розуміємо, що в фокусі багатьох програм, які вже діють на Україна, різні директорати, різні структури Європейського Союзу намагаються знайти додаткові можливості фінансової допомоги чи політичної допомоги Україні. І ми під цим фокусом також дивимося на інструменти східного партнерства.
Know that democratic reforms are a long and arduous process. We can never be complacent with the progress, and we must continue trying to secure the strong rule of law, an independent judiciary, and a solid anti-corruption laws and institutions. This means advocating for more transparent and democratic practices and being vocal for the civil society to be included in the reform process. While there is no doubt that war puts both institutions and people under a severe pressure, this could also be a trigger to establish a new and improved partnership between the government and the civil society, laying the foundation for a strong cooperation in the reconstruction of Ukraine. Internationally, civil society also has a key role to play through the Eastern Partnership policy and its fora. I know that Eastern Partnership has not been very popular among some in Ukraine, including due to fears that being associated with the EAP brand would slow down Ukraine's integration process. Today, I would really try to attempt to dispel those concerns and offer a new perspective through which the opportunities that the policy offers to civil society in Ukraine can be viewed. This is particularly important because, as you know, to all intents and purposes, the Eastern Partnership policy will remain. This has been reconfirmed by all actors here in Brussels, the European institutions, the EU member states, but also in the EAP region, including by the Ukrainian Ministry for Foreign Affairs. First of all, as Ukraine already proceeds towards enlargement, the Eastern Partnership policy remains a key instrument of engagement for the civil society. As you may be aware, the enlargement process is by design an intergovernmental one, which sees the involvement on the European Union on one side and the national government on the other side. There is no structured space for civil society engagement in the process, similar to what we have in the Eastern Partnership. The continuation of the Eastern Partnership policy will be absolutely instrumental to ensure the continuing engagement of the civil society and all of you into the EU processes. We want to have more channels for communication and not fewer. We want to have a stronger and more active involvement and not a weaker one. Secondly, the policy can and should strengthen further the synergy between the Eastern Partnership and the enlargement agenda. As you know, discussions about how to prioritize the EAP and its areas of cooperation are now in full swing. Consensus has emerged on energy, security, environment, interconnectivity, and people-to-people's contact. All these areas are key to Ukraine's present and future, with clear direct and indirect benefits. More energy interconnectivity is key now to sustain Ukraine's energy market. Green reconstruction should ensure that Ukraine has the best possible support in the war efforts, but also the security cooperation is essential so that Ukraine and its immediate neighbors are more resilient to Russia's threat, being it physical or digital. We now have the chance to shape this discussion, and I truly encourage you all to be active in these discussions, to make sure that the EAP can support Ukraine's future as much as possible. We at the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum will do our utmost best to ensure that the Eastern Partnership policy is your friend in your enlargement agenda and not your foe. Thirdly, the Eastern Partnership multilateral framework offers a mediated space between state and non-state actors alike, increasing the chances for reconstruction, rehabilitation, and hopefully societal healing. There is no secret that relations between the EAP countries have been tense at times. Armenia and Azerbaijan fought a very painful war. Ukraine has been invaded from Belarus territory, which consequently increased tension between the population of these two countries. Creating working groups focused on confidence-building measures, involving Eastern Partnership civil society as a key actor in these processes, and providing capacity on peace and trust building is a must. And this will give the EAP countries the opportunity towards better neighborly relations. To conclude on this part, I want to stress that we value our cooperation greatly, and I look forward to cooperating even more closely in the future. As you may have seen from our part, we have been active as possible for Ukraine and its civil society within the fora we have here in Brussels. We have redirected entirely our re-granting funds to Ukraine to fund and we gave 220,000 euro to projects stemming from the war in the form of core support to the civil society organization that had to continue their precious work. Is this enough? I know it's not, but I also know that this was all the money we had at the organization for regranting for 2022. Some of you may also remember that in the immediate days of after Russia launched its war of aggression, some donors froze their support to ongoing projects, leaving many CSOs with active projects in even more dire situation. We advocated strongly with different donors, including the European Commission, and we were happy to see that thanks to our effort, the decision was reversed. Since 24th of February, we have been calling for more military, financial, and humanitarian aid to Ukraine, for stronger sanctions on Russia, for the seizing and sealing of all assets belonging to Russia oligarchs in Europe, and for their profit to be used for Ukraine. We have been calling out to the slow reaction of the United Nations and have repeatedly raised the problem of loss of trust in the International Red Cross that emerged in the first month of the war. We have been advocating at the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum for Ukraine to obtain EU candidate status in formal meetings, in op-eds, and I'm very happy and proud to see Ukraine steadily heading towards democratic reform in spite of all the difficulties arising from the war. As you know, we will soon have our annual assembly, which will focus on the future of the region, but will also honor the Ukrainian civil society in various ways. I look forward to meeting as many of you in person in December or at the earliest possible occasions. Please always know that you have a close ally in us at the Secretariat, and I encourage you to approach us with your initiatives. Thank you for having me today, and I wish you a great continuation of the conference. Slava Ukraini. Thank you.
Героям слава. Dear Hannes, thank you so much for your support personally as on behalf of Secretariat for all you do for Ukraine, for assistance. We appreciate that, and we see your help vis-a-vis these regranting projects for Ukrainian organizations and for our people at large. I think you mentioned many important things like rule of law, strong judiciary, and our role as society in integration. I think that during our panel debate, we will touch upon these issues and have maybe some our inputs for the assembly, which will take place in December. Thank you so much. If you still experience some problems with translation, please flag us. We will try to find you. Друзі, тоді ми маємо вже знову переходити до нашої дискусії. Власне, ми йдемо майже по часу. Отже, тема нашої дискусії – європейська інтеграція і війна, виклики для громадянського суспільства України. Ну і, власне, питання, які організатори винесли для обговорення – це роль громадянського суспільства у просуванні європейської інтеграції України під час війни, тобто особливі умови і як наша роль міняється, посилюється, чи, може, ми маємо якісь труднощі, які мусимо спільно для себе поконати. Європейська політика співпраці з громадянським суспільством, регіоні східного партнерства, нові виклики і перспективи. Тут теж, я думаю, нам є багато про що говорити, і побачити ці перспективи, напевно, дуже важко, але єдине, що зараз я можу навіть це сказати, що форум громадянського суспільства – це одна із тих небагатьох інституцій, яка дійсно давала додану вартість і дає додану вартість для нашого регіону. Ну і, власне, третє запитання – це влада та громадянське суспільство, діалог у нових реаліях. У нас сьогодні досить велика і потужна панель. Маємо прекрасних доповідачів, які розуміються на проблематиці. Хочу представити наших спікерів вельми поважних. Івана Климпуш-Цинцадзе, голова Комітету Верховної Ради України з питань інтеграції України з Європейським Союзом. Іван Нагорняк, радник віце-прем'єр-міністра з питань європейської та євроатлантичної інтеграції. Анна Отилія Нуту, співголова керівного комітету форуму громадянського суспільства Східного партнерства. Олександр Шубін, голова української сторони платформи громадянського суспільства Україна-ЄС, Ігор Бураковський, співголова Ради коаліції РПР і професор Києво-Могилянської академії, Дмитро Шульга, директор Європейського програми Міжнародного фонду відродження, Сінтія Бернава, член керівного комітету форуму громадянського суспільства, Михайло Жернаков, голова правління фундації Де Юре, Олена Павленко, президентка Діксі Груп. Як бачите, у нас дуже багато наших колег, шановних з великою експертизою. Спробуємо, щоб ми всі максимально точно відобразили те, що ми хотіли сказати. По регламенту, колеги, організатори пропонували 10 хвилин. Я все ж таки пропоную, оскільки це про громадянське суспільство, дати нам можливість організаціям вам задавати запитання, тому пропоную обмежити себе до 7 хвилин виступу, вже потім, щоб ми мали можливість подискутувати. Отже, першу до слова запрошую пані Іванну. Іванно Орестівно, ви досвідчена і політикиня, і, власне, працювали в уряді, і зараз в парламенті. Маєте великий трек співпраці з громадським суспільством. Ваше бачення, що нового, власне, які ризики і які перспективи виникають якраз для нашої співпраці в часи війни? Прошу до слова.
Дуже дякую, пане Геннадію, шановні колеги, шановні друзі. Рада вас вітати, принаймні, у такому форматі, але, напевно, почну з того, що абсолютно буде дисонувати з тим, що було вже сказано в рамках вітальних слів. Тому що я вважаю, що ми з вами маємо виходити максимально з реалій, в яких ми сьогодні функціонуємо. І почну з того, знаєте, як північноамериканські індіанці кажуть, якщо кінь мертвий, то злізай. Так от, я вважаю, що східне партнерство – це не існуючий формат. Це формат, який не має ніякої перспективи. І це не означає, що на рівні, скажімо, суспільств, громадських організацій ми не можемо думати про ініціативу, і якраз мені видається, що вона саме з громадянського суспільства і може походити, про те, як переосмислити ті інструменти, які сьогодні по інерції пропонує Європейський Союз в рамках політики не розширення, а в рамках політики сусідства для громадянського суспільства у 6 країнах, які мають дуже мало спільного. Я це дуже дипломатично скажу про те, що мають дуже мало спільного. Тому що я не думаю, що ми маємо можливість, от пані Анна говорила про те, що ось ми будемо там співпрацювати в рамках енергетики, безпеки. Я хочу зрозуміти, в який спосіб ми будемо співпрацювати в рамках енергетики, безпеки наприклад, там охорони навколишнього середовища з Лукашенківською Білоруссю, яка сьогодні повністю використовується для того, щоб атакувати країну, і не знято питання з порядку денного, що білоруські війська можуть в будь-який день почати атакувати Україну разом з російськими військами з території Білорусі знову по землі. Я не можу зрозуміти, як ці питання сьогодні можуть бути обговорювані між Вірменією і Азербайджаном, тому що я думаю, що сама Вірменія на сьогодні не дуже розуміє, в який спосіб вона буде далі розвиватися. І тут немає, і які вона для себе цілі ставить. Ми з вами маємо 3 країни, які там чітко заявили про свій намір до членства в Європейському Союзі. Ми вдячні, ми безмежно вдячні за всю роботу, яка була зроблена для того, щоб і Україна, і Молдова отримали кандидатський статус, і розуміємо, що це тільки початок великого шляху, і за те, що і Грузія отримала принаймні європейську перспективу в цій ситуації, в якій ми опинилися. Але ми також маємо з вами розуміти, що спільного з точки зору майбутнього у нас на даний момент набагато менше, ніж було кілька років тому. Але навіть кілька років тому, коли на майданчик східного партнерства ми намагалися винести питання тієї ж безпеки і говорили про те, що це спільна проблема. Це спільна проблема для Вірменії і Азербайджану, це спільна проблема для Грузії, для України, для Молдови. Менше на той момент це була спільна проблема для Білорусі. Ми пам'ятаємо, який спротив чинився на рівнях, усіх рівнях, зокрема в виконавчих рівнях, для того, щоб включити будь-яку згадку про безпеку на рівні східного партнерства. Тому я думаю, що для того, щоб громадянське суспільство, яке точно має спроможність аналізувати, точно має спроможність продукувати ідеї, пропозиції. Є необхідність переосмислити те, що сьогодні називається східним партнерством, і запропонувати інакший підхід, інакший формат. Я розумію, що європейська бюрократія функціонує, знову ж таки, за інерцією. Східне партнерство створювалося в абсолютно інших умовах, з іншими цілями. Тоді, коли воно створювалося, воно зіграло свою роль. Ми маємо подякувати йому і пробувати думати про те, що запропонувати. І отут я вважаю, що в рамках ось цього ширшого регіону тут є потенційна, серйозна роль громадянського суспільства. Що стосується всередині країни і взаємодії, я думаю, що ви всі колеги з українського громадянського суспільства дуже чітко відчули, що є певні виклики і є певні обмеження і можливості впливати на порядок денний сьогодні з точки зору громадянського суспільства, виходячи з реалій воєнного часу, воєнного стану так само. Мені видається, що в нас дуже не вистачає будь-якої взагалі дискусії стосовно будь-якої політики, яка сьогодні виробляється. У нас політика почала, і так у нас було достатньо проблемне питання вироблення політики і її підготовки з точки зору громадської дискусії, залучення громадянського суспільства. Але те, що ми сприймали, я, колеги, звертаюся до всіх тих, з ким я багато років працювала, те, що ми сприймали після 2014 року як даність про взаємодію і влади, і громадянського суспільства, я колись казала колегам, яких я збирала як віце-прем'єрка, це не даність, нам за це доведеться боротися. Мені видається, що ми сьогодні опинилися в тій ситуації, коли, незважаючи на неймовірну кількість нових ініціатив, виживання і роботу давніх ініціатив, давніх організацій, разом з тим вашого голосу недостатньо чути всередині країни, і його вплив є суттєво меншим, ніж він міг би бути, виходячи з інтелектуальної спроможності громадських організацій, які ми маємо в Україні. І я вважаю це серйозним викликом. І мені видається, що потрібно думати над тим, якими інструментами сьогодні громадянське суспільство може заявити про себе для того, щоб бути помічним і уряду з точки зору європейської інтеграції, і парламенту. Нам в парламенті суттєво не вистачає інституційної спроможності. Суттєво. Але не маючи інституційної спроможності достатньої, ми завжди, і ви знаєте, що до багатьох з вас я неодноразово зверталася за висновками, за аналізом, за пропозиціями, ми завжди готові до сприйняття ваших пропозицій. Будемо вдячні, якщо ви, можливо, після цієї дискусії оновите ті пріоритети, над якими ви працюєте, пришлете їх нам в комітет, ми будемо раді ними скористатися. Ну і дуже коротко на завершення скажу, що, на жаль, основним пріоритетом для всіх нас сьогодні і в громадянському суспільстві, і в парламенті, і в уряді все-таки є питання перемоги в цій війні. І це, напевно, той аспект, де дуже ефективно працює і взаємодіє громадянське суспільство із владою, із виконавчою владою, із парламентом, продукуючи заклик до світу, до вільного світу і працюючи з вільним світом стосовно подальшої допомоги Україні. І я дякую всім тим, в тому числі і секретаріатові Східного партнерства, за те, що ви долучилися до того, щоб голос України був почутий. Насправді це інтерес не виключно України. Це інтерес кожної країни, яка є в регіоні, для того, щоб Україна перемогла. В інших країн, які там на сьогодні все ще об'єднані Східним партнерством, немає шансу вижити як незалежними країнами, як вільними країнами, як такими, що розвиваються демократично, якщо це не вдасться Україні. Тому це є спільний інтерес, і, можливо, це зараз є основний фокус, який би міг стати там спільно дією для громадянських суспільств. Я дякую вам за увагу. Вибачте, можливо, трохи емоційно, але мені видається, що ми просто маємо бути чесні перед собою, коли обговорюємо ті чи інші перспективи на майбутнє. Нам це дасть тільки більшої якості в нашій роботі. Дякую.
Пані Івано, дякую красно за щирість, бо насправді я думаю, що без цього нам навряд чи вдасться якось вийти на розуміння, як нам далі рухатись спільно, ну і, власне, як перемогти нашого ворога, бо кожна політика перемоги починається із середини, із нас самих, як можемо домовитись і співпрацювати. Колеги, це зараз я звертаюся до наших технічних помічників. У нас наші колеги говорять про все ж таки недостатність або неякісність перекладу технічно, я маю на увазі, що не дуже добре працює. Гляньте, будь ласка, якщо щось можна зробити, давайте зробимо, бо у нас декілька спікерів.
Там треба, Геннадій, там просто не на той канал йшов переклад. Там просто треба приклад, щоб подивитися, на який канал. Переклад має йти на англійський канал.
For our friends, I would say that maybe you would try another channel on this icon. Maybe you should press English, it will help you. If not, we'll try to our best to fix the problem immediately. But друзі, якщо у нас далі будуть проблеми, я думаю, що можемо прийти до на англійську мову виступів, хто може з наших експертів. Чи всім добре, якщо буде англійська мова, а не українська? Всі розуміють? Чи можливо все-таки? Якщо немає, то we will skip into English for further communication and discussion. And our next speaker is Ivan Nagirnyak, who is advisor to Vice Prime Minister on European integration. Ivan, we have heard quite sound ideas from Ivana Klimczyndzadze about the challenges we have and about the perspective of Eastern Partnership policy. From your perspective, what is the governmental position on Eastern Partnership, or what is the substitute Ukraine proposes to European Union after this policy? So do you think this policy should be reshuffled, and what instruments or what molds you propose to our European partners?
Thank you, Gennady. Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Thank you for invitation to this discussion, to this conference. I think that the topic is very relevant to these times, because the European integration and the war and what are the challenges for the civil society, it's kind of very interesting and useful topic. I would like, first of all, to totally agree with the opinion of Ivana Klimczyndzadze regarding that today the first and foremost priority for all of us should be the war and the win of in this war, because without that there will be no any European integration in this region. I think that this is a totally understandable fact. In fact, we see that without democratization of Ukraine, there will be no democratization of the region. Without democratization, there will be no European integration. Regarding the Eastern Partnership Initiative, I think that everyone in this panel will agree that from the very beginning in 2009, we were all very skeptical about this initiative. The idea of economic integration and political association was somewhere, in between with the integration and open doors for Ukraine accession. And for government, it was we looked on that initiative like that. Right now we see, and I would like to also here to agree with words of Ivana Klimczyndzadze, that we have some partners in this, I would say partners in breaks, because I would not say that Belarus, especially the so-called president of Belarus, Lukashenko, will be a partner of Ukraine. He is not. And the problem between the Armenia and the Azerbaijan still exists. So we are right now looking more closely on the initiative of the President Emmanuel Macron regarding the European political community. And we have our own ideas regarding what we can use there. We see that the idea of President Emmanuel Macron does not contradict with our accession priorities, and there is accession of the Ukraine to the European Union. And for government right now, the priority is bilateral dialogue between the EU and Ukraine. we are implementing the recommendations of the European Commission. We are working right now on preparation on the government for the start of the negotiations between the EU and Ukraine. And of course, as the next presidency of the European Council will be Swedish, I think that it is very useful to your organization and to other participants of this discussion and the civil society forum to present their own vision on how to reshuffle the forum and the Eastern Partnership Initiative. But what I would like here to mention that right now civil society has a very good expertise in different, I would say, fields of the European integration, be it the agriculture or be it political communication. And I would say that your expertise here is very needed in government, and taking into account our experience regarding the European Commission questionnaire and how we were communicating with each other with that issue, and how the civil society helped Ukrainian government with communication with member states and helped with the filling the questionnaire. I would say that here we have a very good framework and ground for further communication and good joint work regarding the starting of the negotiations. So I will say that together we can work on that. Another issue, and I was a candidate country. This country has a good support from France. And I would say that we in Ukraine will have to take it into account when we are talking about some different, I would say, initiatives in this region. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and it will be very interesting to hear thoughts from other participants.
Ivan, thank you so much for your valuable remarks. Well taken. You mentioned Swedish presidency in Council of European Union. Basically, there is already communication about ideas, how to make this policy more vibrant, what to change. So basically, the work is already undergoing. Our next speaker is a good friend of mine, Anna Nutu, as co-chair of Steering Committee of Eastern Partnership Society Forum. Anna, I think it's no surprise for you that Ukraine is quite skeptical towards Eastern Partnership, and basically in times of war, this is yet another open nerve, which just produces big pain for us when it comes to understanding the rationale behind of this policy for 6 partners. But Anna mentioned some ideas for cooperation and role of civil society. Could you please elaborate on that? What ideas we have to promote as civil society?
Thank you very much. Do you all hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, it's a great honor for me to participate in this meeting, and I'm very unhappy that I cannot be there physically. Anna and I were looking for all sorts of options to come there, but trying to find some European politician, European member of parliament, European bureaucrat who goes to Kiev and kind of join the visit as well, but we didn't manage so far. Yes, and I also wanted to add a few things also coming from the discussion so far, and unfortunately there were a little bit of Ivana's presentation that we didn't get through the translation, so maybe some of those items were covered there as well. I think the Eastern Partnership, and particularly the Civil Society Forum, is one of the instruments that that is really, really useful. And regardless what will be the discussions about the pace of integration. First of all, the Eastern Partnership overall allowed a lot of flexibility. There were always different speeds for all the member states. Ukraine was definitely ahead all the time. It didn't impede in any way the discussions on the association agreement, the inception of the discussions about accession for Ukraine and for Moldova, and now the discussion about Georgia. So there is no incompatibility. I would advise you to keep all the possible instruments that are available, and in particular in what concerns the discussion on civil society, because I heard earlier about Macron's European political community. But please bear in mind that, for example, in that initiative, there is no discussion about a dedicated platform for civil society discussion. Yes, it's only an intergovernmental instrument. And it is vital to have the civil society anchored formally in a structure that can push pressure, that can put pressures on the governments and support the governments at the same time. So we have a dual role here, all of us, and I'm talking also from a perspective of a new member state in Europe. On one hand, we support the reforms that the governments are doing. On the other hand, we are assessing them critically and pushing them and explaining to the partners in Brussels what is happening and when there are backtracking. So it's really important. The multilateral aspect is also very important. For me, the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum represented also a mechanism by which we could liaise both civil society organizations from EU member states and similar civil society organizations from several countries in the Eastern Partnership. And it was very important because we had regional projects in which we saw that there are very similar threats and very valuable experiences that can be shared from one place to another. Yes. So, for example, and Olena has been a partner in one of our projects. We looked very intensely at the threat that Russia presents to the entire region, plus Europe, looking at energy. And we used the opportunity of the membership in the Eastern Partnership Forum to gather those experiences, make our governments understand a little bit how Russia can be a threat even to the EU, and advocate for Brussels and for our national government to make sure that they don't become vulnerable to political blackmail. So these types of things are really important, and I think any single instrument that remains available should not be dismissed, because it's you never know. Yes, so there are various discussions. Some people in Brussels can focus more on one aspect, others can be more focused on multilateral discussions, others on bilateral discussions. So it's better to have not to put all the eggs in one basket. Also, we are trying to find out a way in the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum. There have been a lot of discussions about how the civil society can support, before the governments can do it, reconciliation between in regional conflicts. So the war will end at some point, and we'll need to rebuild our relationships with each other. And it's not about, Armenia and Azerbaijan are not necessarily their governments. Belarus is not necessarily Lukashenko. And after this war is over, we really need to build bridges, because otherwise these types of conflicts are always going to remain a major threat to the surrounding countries. And we must understand that for all of us, including for the countries which are at the eastern border of the European Union, Russia remains the biggest threat. And for that, we need to cooperate as much as possible, also as civil society and in cooperation with our governments. I think we also learned something very difficult from the accession of other EU member states and from the discussions in the Balkans. Reforms, sometimes you have a government which is a reformist, and it usually attracts the best people in the civil society, because in our countries, there aren't so many reformists, so it's very natural that the best reformists go to the government. But then, political crises are very common, and then you get a government which is completely anti-reformist. So we need to have a stable format in which we anchor these things in a clear format, with the civil society pressuring the government, no matter who is in power at a certain moment, to still keep the track on the path to reform. And we learned that the hard way, even in Romania. So immediately after accession, a lot of reforms which had been done previously were reversed, simply because they weren't very well anchored in a civil society watchdog systematic approach. And I think you have, in particular in Ukraine, you have a very big advantage. I think the civil society in Ukraine is one of the strongest in the region, probably stronger than most EU member states as well, in terms of watchdog capacities, policy making, regional, not to mention for us, it was simply amazing how quickly the civil society mobilized for humanitarian work when the crisis hit. So this has to be very strongly supported, and there is also a lot of lessons to be learned by us, EU member states, by countries in the region, particularly those with which you have very tense relations right now. I'm talking about Belarus, and to make sure that we are all pushing in the same direction, which is closer to the European Union and as close as possible. And I would stop here, and I would like to answer to your questions if you have. I was just trying to add up a little bit of what hasn't been touched before. So. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It really helps us to expand some ideas already mentioned. But from my side, it would be fair maybe to give yet another floor to Ivana Konstantadze, maybe for tweet style option to recap your ideas you mentioned, because I think it's very important for our discussion to have them all heard and understood.
Well, thank you. I am not against communication between civil societies. I am coming to politics from the civil society, and I think all the Ukrainian participants know this very well. And I value immensely the work that civil society is capable of doing. But I also believe that civil society as an engine for the change, as a watchdog for the governments, as a supporter for the transformation, is capable of calling spade a spade and is capable of suggesting new formats. And this is probably the time for the civil society to act in that way. It's not that we are dismissing any multinational platforms, but I think we have to understand that civil society in the Eastern Partnership cannot function just as a separate platform without any discussion that the governments would have. what kind of discussion of the government we have right now with the Belarusian government, or what kind of interparliamentary dialogue we have. So you are not backing anything on that particular track. So therefore, it could be done through a different notion, and reinventing the policy could be beneficial for everybody. I really think so. Very briefly, with regard to democratization processes and need to watch the reforms. I really, really appreciate what has been said, that civil society has the capacity of criticizing, pointing out the problematic areas, but at the same time suggesting ways for improvement. And I think that this is exactly something that we very much need right now in Ukraine, besides what I've been saying about the need to fight for common cause in the West, in the free world, for understanding of the processes here, and for increased support to Ukraine in its fight against aggressor. I really believe that there is, unfortunately, an appetite that during the martial law, for obvious reasons, some of the rights are being suppressed, some of the, or being not necessarily suppressed, but being cut. So, but we have to ensure that we are, as a civil society, watching this fine line very carefully, and actually raising the voice when this is happening, in order not to have the problem when we are fighting against dictatorship, to lose those democratic reforms that have been already achieved in the process of European integration, both in Ukraine or in Moldova or in Georgia or in other states. And right now, kind of ring the alarm bells to stop this backsliding in order to be more successful in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next expert I would like to take the floor is Alexander Shubin, chair of Ukrainian side of civil society platform Ukraine EU. Alexander, are you with us?
Yes.
Please.
Hello. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to this forum. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. And first of all, I would like to react using the bridge left by Ivana Klimpush-Simsadze, connecting the issues of war and civil society. We often are talking about the dimension martial law, and of course the war and military process is not the time for additional discussions. We understand this because it's time to fulfill orders, it's time to be rapid, to be very reactive, and sometimes civil society dialogue is a kind of additional procedure for policy making, which takes a lot of time and which probably demands some additional moves from the political forces or government. But we should remember that we are fighting not simply against Russia as aggressor, as a country. We fight protecting our choice, protecting democracy and the way of thinking. And actually, we are declaring the way of thinking which envisage these additional procedures, which envisage necessary steps, including the additional dialogue, additional consultations with civil society, which sometimes prevents countries or democracies from adopting decisions by totalitarian leaders, which prevents from ruining electoral law. And I would say that in this case, probably the main points of our day-by-day work should be use of the European experience of these political decisions. We in civil society platform, I see many colleagues who represent my platform are trying to build this connection with the European Social and Economic Committee. Everybody knows it as one of the constituent bodies of the European Union, and in October we conducted our internal discussion, thinking about our own future within the context of European integration of Ukraine, and everybody agreed that it is the right time to think about institutional strengthening of civil society in Ukraine, because we have some permanent bodies for social dialogue, for example, in triangle of employers, trade unions, and government, like National Tripartite Social and Economic Council, but there is no such a body for the third group, the NGOs representing various interests, which are the part of civil dialogue in European Union. And I think it's the right time to talk with the government of Ukraine about some institutionalization of civil dialogue in Ukraine. When we speak about civil society dialogue within the framework of Eastern Partnership, I personally represent the trade union sector, and I may say that in countries which unfortunately, I hope temporarily, are under the influence of Russia, civil society organizations are not always independent. And we clearly know that some trade unions from Russia, from Belarus, and from Armenia, even proposing this dialogue to us, are totally dependent on the present-day governments of those countries. And that is why I would say that we should be especially careful when we are speaking about those bridges apart from the official relations of the countries. I would also mention that maybe we do not realize this yet, but we are already, or at least a huge part of our population is already in the joint European market. I'm speaking about the Ukrainian refugees who had to flee from the threats of war, and now they are under temporary protection in Europe using actually the rules of joint market. And there is a huge list of work to do in order to solve the problems of our co-citizens in the countries of Europe, in order to I would say help them to temporarily become parts of their societies, to find jobs, to get real approach to social protection, to medical protection, or to education in that countries. And this is I would say, for me, it's a huge topic to cooperate with the civil society organizations of the European Union, to work with, for us as trade unions, with the trade union organizations of Poland, Czech Republic, Austria, Germany, whatever, as well as to organize similar cooperation, direct cooperation for the organizations of other sectors. And I'm saying this just to show that probably I would agree that Eastern Partnership fulfilled its task in specific periods of history of Ukraine. And now it is probably proper time to speak about future formats of cooperation, which would include Ukraine and Moldova as candidate countries, and Baltic or Eastern European countries, and one of the key topics, especially for these military period under the martial law could be the issue of support of the Ukrainian citizens at the territories of that countries, and reintegration and return of the citizens back to Ukraine in order to continue their life here. As a whole, I would like to thank to the organizers of this event for inviting me to be with you today. I would like to say that the Ukrainian civil society platform is ready to do its best to grant its support to governmental bodies, to parliamentary bodies, to use the expertise of our organizations to help us speed up European integration. And of course, we understand that now the task number one is to get victory in this war. But I would like to stress that the victory in the war without European perspective cannot be considered as the full victory. Probably we are speaking not only about getting peace, but also about securing our European choice and our democratic rights for future. Thank you.
Alexandra, thank you so much for your perspective. We are moving ahead, and I'm giving floor to Igor Barakovsky, co-chair of the Remission Package of Reforms Coalition Board, professor at the National University at Kyiv-Mogila Academy. There was a question raised by Ivana Konstantadze about that at the moment we lack some comprehensive or meaningful discussion about any public policy in Ukraine at the moment. What's your perspective? What's your take on that? From your angle of expertise, do you see that we still have to propose yet another instruments and to activate ourselves in this, our proposal of expertise for decision makers in Ukraine?
Okay, thank you very much for an opportunity to talk to such a distinguished audience. I would like to start in English and then maybe we'll switch into Ukrainian. As far as I understand, we have already somehow fixed the problem with translation, right? Добре, тоді я почну українською, а скажу кілька слів англійською. Значить, я дуже уважно прослухав всі виступи, чесно кажучи, підготував тут собі декілька тез, але от сам формат нашої дискусії, зміст, який зараз висвітився, наштовхнув мене на кілька думок, якими я хотів би одразу поділитися. Я хочу зробити такий собі короткий дисклеймер. У нас попереду ще...
Our friends say there is no translation.
Okay, I'll switch to English. Well, thanks a lot for an opportunity to talk to such a distinguished audience. Definitely, I prepared a couple of points to be discussed, but I decided actually to change the format of my presentation, take into account that actually later, there would be a very detailed discussion what should be done in different fields. So I'm not going to be a kind of Wikipedia which knows everything and trying to present a kind of comprehensive point of view. My points are quite obvious maybe and quite straightforward. So I would like to start from the very beginning. Point number one, right now actually we need to reassess the existing instruments in terms of cooperation between European Union and Ukraine, and in terms of actually, let's call it, civil society cooperation between European Union and Ukraine. Well, definitely, actually, the war showed a lot of examples of, so to speak, a lot of problems right now, and definitely we need actually to understand these problems and to move and to solve them further on. Point number two, second R, let's put it in such a way. I call it actually, reconsideration. Reconsideration of the very essence of our cooperation. Frankly speaking, I'm not very much in favor of talking, in different. Давайте я тоді українською, буде простіше. Друге, це reconsideration, тобто це певне переосмислення. І з моєї точки зору, ключове питання переосмислення – це перехід до нової якості нашої співпраці. Якість нашої співпраці дуже проста. Партнерство заради членства. Партнерство заради членства або платформа заради членства. І partnership for membership, мені здається, це якраз та теза, яка на сьогоднішній день має працювати. Ну і нарешті третє, relaunch. Ми повинні перезапустити багато в чому діяльність і організації громадянського суспільства, в тому числі наших зв'язків з іноземними партнерами і перш за все з Європейським Союзом. Це, якщо так можна сказати, філософія. Тепер кілька слів про політику. Знову таки, я не хотів би перехоплювати ініціативу своїх колег, які будуть про це говорити, але для мене, що є, так сказати, дуже важливим сьогодні. Перше питання – це те, що війна висвітлила дуже багато проблем в роботі і органів влади, і в роботі організацій громадянського суспільства. Я не буду говорити про ці всі проблеми. Мені здається, що сьогодні ключова проблема – це подивитись і зрозуміти, що відбувається на низовому рівні, на рівні місцевих громад, на рівні місцевої влади. Тому що кінець кінцем місцева влада сьогодні взяла на свої плечі основний тягар проблем, пов'язаних із військовим часом, і, очевидно, на неї ляже основний тягар організації повоєнної відбудови. Тут громадянське суспільство і місцеві громади, мені здається, це, в принципі, новий виклик, на який ми повинні всі звернути увагу. Пункт номер 2. Мені здається, що сьогодні у нас виникла така собі певна проблема. З одного боку, військовий час передбачає певну централізацію влади. І це абсолютно правильно, тому що в єдиному пориві, єдиним кулаком ми зможемо подолати російську агресію. Але з іншого боку, громадянське суспільство – це мережеві структури. І тут, очевидно, нам треба шукати якісь можливості, як наше мережування і потенціал нашого мережування поєднати з централізованими діями. Дуже простий приклад. Сьогодні українська держава веде активну дипломатію за кордоном, але водночас українське громадянське суспільство веде дуже активні просвітницькі адвокаційні дії з нашими іноземними партнерами. Як зробити синергію? Як зробити так, щоб державна дипломатія і дипломатія народна або дипломатія громадянського суспільства працювали разом, зважаючи на те, що сьогодні демократичний світ, звичайно, підтримує Україну, але давайте чесно говорити, не весь демократичний світ сьогодні підтримує Україну, і багато хто просто не визначився в силу тих чи інших причин, про це я не буду говорити. Ще буквально 2 тези для того, щоб не забирати багато часу. Для мене дуже важливо, коли ми говоримо про реформи, і коли ми говоримо про економічну політику, і коли ми говоримо про відбудову, говорити про Ukrainian ownership, тобто про українську власність на ці реформи. Це тема дуже така собі непроста, і тут, як мені здається, громадянське суспільство повинно виступити, знаєте, таким от собі інструментом інституційної пам'яті. Незважаючи на війну, ми пам'ятаємо, що їх треба робити. У нас були відповідні напрацювання. Давайте зробимо так, щоб ці реформи під час війни не гальмувалися, про них не забували, і ці реформи рухалися далі. Тут є дуже багато прикладів, одразу можу, так сказати, проанонсувати виступ Михайла Жернакова, тому що якраз от реформи в юридичній сфері, так, в судочинстві і так далі, це те, що почалося, і те, що, на жаль, сьогодні перебуває під певною загрозою. Ну, можливо, так сказати, я не правий, але тим не менше так воно все і є. І останнє, що я хотів би сказати, коли ми спілкуємося з нашими партнерами, коли ми спілкуємося з тими, хто нам щиро хоче допомагати, я б хотів би все ж таки, щоб нам більше довіряли українському громадянському суспільству, більше довіряли нашій експертизі, більше довіряли нашій участі в вирішенні тих чи інших питань, тому що традиційна така, знаєте, біполярний підхід. Ми щось пропонуємо, наші партнери щось пропонують, ми там про щось, так мовити, і говоримо, але він, очевидно, вже вичерпав себе. І останнє, що я хотів би сказати, знову таки, можливо, в такому загальному плані, але це дуже важливо, бо поки ми не вирішуємо загальні питання, дуже важко рухатися по питанням. Да? Що має бути сьогодні ключовим в нашій економічній політиці і на що повинна громадянське суспільство зосередити свою увагу? Я думаю, що тут, в принципі, є дуже дві тези. Перша теза – це економічна стійкість, economic resilience в широкому розумінні цього слова, це і соціальна стійкість. І друге – це повоєнна відбудова, post-war economic recovery, post-war economic reconstruction. Дякую всім, я думаю, ми переможемо. Слава Україні!
Героям слава! Пане Ігорю, дякую за те, що таку рамку зробили досить системну, з якою можна працювати, власне, і з подальшим баченням розвитку як і громадського суспільства, так і нашої співпраці. Переходимо до нашого наступного спікера, Дмитро Шульга. Дмитре, завжди радий чути твою думку, особливо коли йдеться про сфери, які пов'язані і близькі для тебе. Перше – це громадське суспільство. І друге – це східне партнерство. Власне, ти був завжди на вістрі дискусії в Україні, що відбувається. Отже, виходячи з того, що ми зараз почули вже від наших колег, ну і, власне, від твого бачення, твоя рефлексія щодо, можливо, подальшої трансформації східного партнерства, якщо така можлива і необхідна, ну і, власне, де там громадянське суспільство може мати свою роль і місце. Прошу.
Дякую. Дякую, Геннадію. А скажи, будь ласка, все-таки якою мовою виступати?
Нам сказали, що вже нам налаштували переклад. So translation is on, so basically we can go on in Ukraine, right? Але до твого вибору.
Окей, ну, якщо це можливо, то, можливо, я би зробив частину виступу англійською, а частину українською, якщо це окей.
З мого боку, як мутатора, цілком можливо.
Just to be sure that I'm kind of understood correctly by relevant audiences, I would like to start with English and then switch to Ukrainian. So I just have several reflections on what has been said, quite a lot of interesting theses. First of all, when we discuss about Eastern Partnership, let's just remember what it is. So official definition of the Eastern Partnership on the sides of European institutions is that Eastern Partnership is a specific Eastern dimension of the European neighborhood policy. So, I mean, there is European neighborhood policy and there is different enlargement policy. So if Ukraine now a candidate country and Moldova as well, and Georgia is a potential candidate country, so enlargement policy is our framework and not the European neighborhood policy anymore. This is my understanding. I understand that for many people in Brussels, it's kind of now more usual to kind of to present it as not conflicting situation, but to me, it's kind of really either or. Either you're a neighbor or you're a candidate. So for me, it's kind of really either you're part of neighborhood policy or you're part of enlargement policy. But I understand the debate is ongoing, and as I heard in Brussels, actually in the European Commission, there is only one DG now responsible for both. So that might be implying that there needs to be some changes adopted. How exactly, let's discuss this in more detail, but definitely it should not be kind of left as it is, like just to present it like European neighborhood policy is going on, this partnership is going on as it was before. Just to remind that kind of there was some talks about added value which Eastern Partnership present for Ukraine, for instance, for dialogue with civil society, and if there will be no Eastern Partnership anymore as a framework, then we will have less platforms for dialogue with civil society. I really doubt it. I cannot agree, with this thesis because, well, first of all, I don't agree that in Ukrainian case, Eastern Partnership was the major driver for civil society dialogue with authorities, with the government. It might be the case for some other countries of the Eastern Partnership, some partner countries, but not in the Ukrainian case. In the Ukrainian case, of course, national platform of the civil society forum was a participant as an important platform for such dialogue, but not the exclusive one and not the only one. So I think the deeper we will go into the enlargement framework, the more actual opportunities for more conditionality from the European Union will be applied, and more opportunities for expanding and deepening dialogue between civil society and the government will be available, which is really needed, as we already discussed as well. I agree that there were some useful things which we had experienced from years of Eastern Partnership. I think that actually the biggest, maybe most useful thing which we had is actually the Civil Society Forum, and not in particular ways of maybe some particular, I don't know, institutionalizations and projects and deliverables, but first of all, in just more socialization, more linkages at the level of civil societies of our countries. Basically, people just get to know each other, and that's already kind of, that was an opportunity for that, and that's already was some added value. But I think that now we actually have come to some point where we have some limit to that kind of. So we have already established something, but now, in order to do more, and we have to do more now in these circumstances, Eastern Partnership is already no longer the most useful framework for that. And now I will switch to Ukrainian because I will talk mostly about kind of, I think, Ukrainian perspective of how we see things here. Я думаю, що якщо говорити про те, як ми дивимося на східне партнерство, як я пояснив, з моєї точки зору, воно вже нам і раніше мало, скажімо так, додаткової ваги порівняно з тим, що було на двосторонньому треку України ЄС. Але і зараз, якщо навіть ми дивимося на відносини з відповідними країнами, то зрозуміло, що зараз вже східне партнерство це не є рамкою для наших відносин. З Білоруссю, зрозуміло, у нас величезна проблема. По суті, це співучасник російської агресії. І зараз ми бачимо, йде дискусія, на жаль, не така публічна, як, можливо, потрібно було би це робити, стосовно подальшої політики України, стосовно Білорусі, стосовно Лукашенка режиму і стосовно різних форм опозиції до Лукашенка. Я думаю, що тут роль громадянського суспільства, звичайно, має бути дуже важлива, і ми маємо використовувати наші персональні зв'язки, наші напрацювання, наші соціальні капітали, які ми напрацювали в попередні роки. Я не думаю, що це відбудеться в рамках східного партнерства, хоча, якщо можливо, це буде, якщо східне партнерство, якщо інституції східного партнерства якимось чином можуть допомогти нам збудувати альянс антилукашенківський між громадянами України і Білорусі, це було би добре. В якій саме формі, це, я так розумію, зараз велика дискусія в Україні, і ми можемо детальніше про це поговорити. Стосовно інших країн, партнерів східного партнерства, як вони були визначені, то очевидно, що з Молдовою і, сподіваюсь, Грузією у нас має бути абсолютно окремий формат з країнами-кандидатами, ніж з тими країнами, які не є такими і наразі не виглядає, що вони стануть країнами-кандидатами в ближчій перспективі будь-якій. Зрозуміло, що нам потрібно, якщо ми говоримо про обмін досвідом, який по суті завжди позиціонувався як ключове завдання для східного партнерства, це організувати обмін досвідом між країнами-партнерами. Ну, якщо ми говоримо про обмін досвідом щодо інтеграції до Європейського Союзу, то насправді нам дуже цікавий досвід країн Західних Балкан. І тут мені здається, що варто, власне, говорити про те, що нам потрібно зараз дійсно так будувати форми взаємодії з цими країнами, власне, для обміну досвідом, щоб не повторювати їхніх помилок. Ну, хоча, знову ж таки, постійно наполягаючи на тому, що це не йдеться про якісь пакування, спільні пакети і так далі. Це однозначно нам треба відстоювати позицію про те, що повна диференціація, тобто кожному по заслузі, абсолютно кожна країна має розглядатися окремо. І якщо ми говоримо про те, що східне партнерство нам, давайте будемо відверті, не сильно допомогло, але, що називається, не було б щастя, то нещастя допомогло. Зараз ця війна допомогла дуже сильно. Це налагодження зв'язків з суспільствами країн ЄС, причому дуже часто навіть дуже віддаленими суспільствами, географічно маю на увазі віддаленими. Ми бачимо, яка величезна хвиля підтримки України саме на низовому, на громадському рівні присутня в різних країнах-членах ЄС, таких як, далеких від України, таких як, не знаю, Іспанія, Португалія, не тільки в країнах-сусідах, а й по всьому Європейському Союзу. Ми бачимо, які величезні дискусії зараз про переосмислення загалом політики безпеки і зовнішньої політики загалом на європейському континенті, але не тільки, відбуваються в ключових країнах-членах ЄС, таких як Німеччина, і не тільки. Це створює для нас можливість, якою треба користатися. Знову ж таки, це абсолютно виходить за рамки східного партнерства. В моєму розумінні це зовсім не про це. Це про те, що по суті ми зараз Україна є частиною Європи, і атака Росії на Україну є атака Росії на весь європейський устрій, такий, як він був як мінімум після завершення Холодної війни, а насправді, можливо, навіть і після Другої світової війни. І в цій ситуації нам, звичайно, треба використовувати цей, я погоджуюсь тут з паном Ігорем Валентиновичем, нам потрібно посилювати...
Переб'ю тебе, там знову, кажуть, припав переклад, тому знову роби свіч.
Okay. So in these circumstances, when Russian aggression is not actually aimed only at Ukraine, but at the whole European order, based on norms and values of international law, it's clear that basically we have this momentum when we, I agree with Igor Burakovsky that we have to increase civil society diplomacy, as we call it, where not only NGOs and think tanks, but also media, also academia, universities are important players, and trade unions, as was already mentioned as well. So we need to reach out to the civil societies of European member states to mobilize support for Ukraine and to keep the momentum to not to allow it to go down. And final point, not only in Europe, actually, somehow we see that we have a broader task that we need also to approach broader parts of the world, because it's not only European problem what we have, this Russia-Ukrainian war, but it's a global problem, it's a global challenge. And here we have to establish direct Ukrainian links with many other countries and societies with whom we traditionally have not had such established linkages. And this is our Ukrainian task, but if Europeans can help us here, there might be some also ways which we can explore and debate how to do it, how to approach this task. Thank you.
Dmitro, thank you so much for this elaboration, quite useful. And now we are going to our next speaker. We still have 3 in our list. At this time, I would ask our participants, maybe if they have already questions or comments, please type them in chat in order for our speakers to be prepared to answer for them. And we go on with our friend, Cynthia Bernava, steering committee member, Eastern Partnership Salty Forum. Cynthia, the floor is yours, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm very close to the Russian border, and here is very bad internet, so I will keep my message without an online camera, so to keep at least some signal alive. And I will just share some perspective from the Baltics, since I am originally from Latvia. So as you know, the Baltic countries and your closest neighbors in Poland are your very strong supporters, and I would like to share some updates which may not been so much shared from our perspective, what we have done to support Ukraine in very different ways. So we truly believe that if freedom is threatened in one place, it's threatened everywhere, and it's based on our tragic history. And as you may know, the Parliament of Latvia was the first parliament in the world declaring Russia as a terrorist state. And after Latvia, parliaments of Lithuania and Estonia also declared Russia as a terrorist state. It's a very strong message to the world, and we don't need to tolerate this, what is going on in our neighborhood and also in Ukraine. And as you know, and as you witness it in firsthand, the tragedy of war is that innocent people and unarmed civilians are paying the highest price. And Russia's war in Ukraine has caused a humanitarian disaster. And high energy prices maintain high levels of global inflation, which must dramatically affect the world's most vulnerable populations. And we also witness this in our daily lives. And we have reached inflation as we had in early 90s. And yeah, we also pay very high price supporting Ukraine. We experience cyber attacks every day. and a lot of threats towards those who are active supporting Ukraine. But meanwhile, we are very strong, cooperating with politicians and also policymakers, not only in Latvia and the Baltics, but also other countries. And yeah, there are some successes as your allies. So as we can witness, this crisis is changing Europe as well. And not only civil society in the Baltics, but across Europe and beyond stands in solidarity with Ukraine in many different ways, like we have never seen it before. And for example, like country I come from, Latvia, is providing important military, political, and economic support. And we have spent almost 1% of our GDP on military, economic, and financial support to Ukraine. And proportionally, it is more than any other country in the world, especially taking into account that Latvia is at the moment around 1.8 million people population. It's very small. And as you know, the Baltic nations and Latvia has been one of the Ukraine's toughest supporters. And the presidents of the 3 Baltic states and Poland in April were the first Western leaders to visit Ukraine after the Russian invasion. And they met with Ukrainian president and have been vocal in support of Ukraine's European Union candidate status and the need to stop Russian political and economic influence in Europe. And also in 2019, for instance, the president of Latvia pitched president of Ukraine the idea for the Crimea platform, a consultation and coordination format which has a goal to put an end to the occupation of Crimea, and for which the president of Latvia received the Ukrainian State Award in 2021. And however, the legal gap remains, and no international court has jurisdiction over the main issue, the starting of a war of aggression, the gravest violation of the Charter of United Nations and international law. Therefore, Latvia has called for the establishment of a special tribunal. The main task of this special tribunal would be to investigate the responsibility of the Russian state in the crime of aggression. And after the war, Russia will have to pay reparations to Ukraine for all the damages. And this special tribunal could be part of an international reparations mechanism. And the special tribunal could be established on a basis of a resolution of the General Assembly by another international organizations or a group of like-minded states. And as you know, Baltic countries and Poland are hosting a lot of Ukrainian refugees. And as we are member states of European Union and NATO, as independent states, we share this responsibility to abide by international law. And we stand with the brave people of Ukraine, and the aggressor must be held accountable. And the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court have already started proceedings on particular aspects of Russia's war against Ukraine. And the European Court of Human Rights has also initiated proceedings. And you should know you are not alone. And the Baltic states and your other closest neighbors have made a decision to stand with you until the end, how long it will take. And yeah, we are with independent Ukraine and with a brave Ukrainian people. Slava Ukraini!
Героям слава. Cynthia, thank you so much for all the support we have from civil society, from your region, as well as from your governments. You mentioned correctly that it is big chunk of your DGP. At the same time, I know that Latvia gave the highest proportion of its military budget to Ukraine, and it's well taken and well noted in Ukraine. So thank you so much for this help and for this friendship we have. It's very important for us. We move to our next speaker, which is Mikhailo Zhernakov, the Euro Foundation chair of the board. Mikhailo, as Anna mentioned in introductory remarks, still rule of law and judiciary are high on the agenda of cooperation between the EU and Ukraine. And basically, from this point, from your perspective, the role of NGOs and think tanks in this area, do you think your role is increased or diminished, or how do you see the moment that we are in?
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, colleagues, for doing this. This, of course, is very important to continue the dialogue, because the times of war, of COVID first and then war, now we experience a huge lack of communication between the civil society actors and other stakeholders. So it's very important to continue the dialogue. But of course, I have to agree with the previous speakers that in order to have this dialogue substantial and in order to be taken seriously, really, we have to stop pretending that there's, for example, there can be a substantive dialogue with the Lukashenko's Belarus, but that's been already mentioned, so I will not stop here. What I would like to stress on is, of course, the rule of law. Like Igor Burakovsky said before, happy birthday, Pan Igor. Like previous speaker said, without the rule of law, you cannot have the independent, powerful, functioning state. You take a look at the map. I see a map behind your shoulders, Hennady. You can hardly find a successful state which doesn't have rule of law. So that's a one-to-one correlation. If we want to be a successful state, if we want to be inside the EU, if we want to win, we have to have rule of law, and of course, the independent judiciary is a part of it. And of course, right now, a hugely important process is the EU candidacy and accession negotiations, the probable accession negotiations. Obviously, we're all working towards that. For example, judicial reform is number one there. So that is why, answering your question, Hennady, that of course helps tremendously and helps civil society also to be heard in this regard, because again, out of 7 points that are connected to the candidacy status, the number one is the judicial reform in 3 institutions, which are the High Qualification Commission of Judges, the High Council of Justice, and the Constitutional Court, by far the 3 most important ones. And I have to mention, of course, as the judicial reform came or appeared among these 7 points, and it happens to be number one among the 7. Of course, it gave a huge boost to certain things, such as the reform of the Constitutional Court, that despite the constitutional crisis that erupted a couple of years ago after the November decision of the Constitutional Court to dismantle a huge part of the anti-corruption infrastructure, despite all these things weren't moving in terms of the Constitutional Court reform, despite the Venice Commission's opinions. But now they are, because the government, President Zelensky himself and his government, is really passionate about fulfilling whatever it takes to quickly get these things done and move forward. And of course, we now have this unprecedented speed at which, on one hand, of course, we applaud the government and other actors, the civil society actors who helped, fill in the questionnaire and submit it very quickly and then do other things. On the other hand, of course, very fast doesn't often mean very quality work. And here's where we should be very cautious, because, of course, again, we recognize how important this is, and we want to be, the EU members as fast as possible. But we want to be, this is the process where the process itself is at least as important, a very rare, actually, place where the process itself is maybe even more important than the destination, because the EU integration is, in fact, becoming exactly or very similar to the other member states. And to become that, of course, we have to do a lot of homework, a lot of quality work. And what is really important is to also, we're now approaching the necessity to prioritize this quality over speed and over quantity, and to prioritize it from both ways. That's very important, because we now see also not only from the Ukrainian part, but also from the part of the EU, as in some ways, the will to move forward fast, to maybe give Ukraine a free pass or check the boxes somewhere where because it's war, we have to help Ukraine and so on. But it's really not helping if we check the boxes and if we formally look at the rule of law reforms, especially, and if we don't learn from previous mistakes. Because I have to remind you, back in 2016, we had a very comprehensive judicial reform. We changed the constitution. We were set to change many things. And EU and the other international stakeholders were applauding the government and Ukraine in doing, creating the new Supreme Court and launching this, all wholesale judicial examination and so on. But which turned out that, having examined 3,000 judges, we only dismissed 15. And then the Supreme Court leadership, the new Supreme Court that was created from scratch, turns out was led by a Russian or one of the leaders of the Supreme Court for years was a Russian citizen. And somehow all the systems that were applauded again and very that the EU turned out to not be able to take that into account. So we don't have to repeat those mistakes. We have to be vigilant. We have to be really thorough about the rule of law reforms. And also because we now have a very unique situation where we have about 2,500 vacancies inside the judiciary. And we're now in a situation where it very much depends on the success of this iteration of the reform, how Ukraine's judiciary will look like in the next 30 years or so. Because it's these judicial governance bodies that we are reforming now will hire the next 3,000 judges, or somewhere around 3,000 judges. And if we are successful, then of course it will be a new generation and the new judiciary and the new Ukraine. If we're not, then we'll just repeat the same mistakes, and we'll have the very controlled and corrupt judges, which will not be able to get rid of in the nearest generation or so. So, and I'm finishing here. The last thing I would like to mention. So basically, just wrapping up, it is very important to be vigilant and to not turn blind eye on the problems of the reform of the judiciary, which we do have. It's not, we're still optimistic about this, but there are things that have to be fixed. I will not dig very much into the details. Last but not least, we have to have more civil society players that work on the national level, that advocate for national reforms. It's no secret that in Ukraine, the civil society is a major driver for change, for the reforms. And where there are strong civil society actors, the reforms tend to be there and tend to be successful. Where they're not, the things are not moving at all. It's as simple as this. So we now facing a very big challenge of transforming the country as a whole. So basically modernizing every and each state institution that we have. And so we together with other experts, we counted that there's about 35 different spheres of state policy, of national policy, where we would rather have 2 or 3 or 4 strong NGOs that work on national level on each direction. We do not have this quantity of strong NGOs that can develop, advocate for, and implement, of course, in cooperation with others, and implement these reforms. So that is why I'm convinced we have to concentrate on raising these new actors, on increasing the strength and the capacity of the existing ones in order to have these independent players who would push for more change and who in the end who will transform Ukraine and make it a real European country and a real member of the European Union. Thank you very much.
Mikhail, thank you for this forward-looking about certified areas and about our expertise we have to generate within Ukrainian NGO and think tank sector. It's very important for us. And basically, our last but not least distinguished speaker in our panel, Olena Pavlenko, Dixie Group, the president of this organization. Olena, we have been mentioning the idea of energy cooperation in the region, but still we have for ourselves to define where it is possible politically or technically. And in this regard also, do you regard this cooperation between energy and environment organizations in the region still important?
Thank you. Thank you very much for this great opportunity to talk today. I will be short, but I will put on the table several questions which I think we all should discuss, not only among themselves, but also with our government, our parliament, and also our European counterparts. First, as previous speakers mentioned already, yes, the war accelerated European integration of Ukraine. In energy sector, it's especially visible because Ukraine joined ENTSO-E, but not only in energy. Yes, we've got the candidate status. We are moving forward very fast. We are trying to also join digital common space, yes. But the question is here, having this candidate status, when Ukraine will start talking about the membership. Because I believe when the war ends, this discussion that whether Ukraine is ready or not to become a member will start. There will be definitely some countries which will say that they can have this candidate status for quite a long time. And I think we all have to keep this in mind that and continue pressing the European and Ukrainian government and parliament that this should be the membership should be obtained really very in a short period of time. If we talk about 2027, if we talk about 2029, let's keep these deadlines. Second, civil society played a huge role in this during this time when we were working on the candidate status during the war. I am pretty sure a lot of us helped with filling this questionnaire, which government has submitted to the government. There were a lot of civil society organizations who did advocacy campaigns around Europe, and what is important to also to keep in mind and on the table among all of us that when the war finish and the government will come back to its everyday work and negotiations with European Union, it is important that civil society organizations should still play such a huge role. So we should not be just the ambulance or reanimation, let's say, yes, for help for the government only when it is needed. We should have our place on the table when we negotiate with European side, and we should have this place for us every day, all the time, even after the war. My third point is rather the message to the European side, because if we talk about European integration of Ukraine, I think civil society organizations should also have its own path of integration with the European institutions. I don't know, not only civil society organizations, but also other forms of communication and cooperation. Dixie tried to do some testing. We applied for some expert group in energy sector, in gas sector under the DG Energy. And we were refused. The message and the answer was because you do not have enough experience. But the question is, of course, we will not have enough experience if we do not have a chance, you know, to practice and to try and to at least join such initiatives. So it really will be quite a hard work for us, but I think still a task for us to advocate also in front of the European Commission, European Parliament, that there should be already some doors for Ukrainian experts, Ukrainian civil society organizations to join internal European groups, initiatives, and some other forms of cooperation to be able to get this experience as soon as possible. And the fourth question is, I have heard what Ivana said, what Anna Otilia said, and in terms of energy cooperation, civil society organizations in Eastern Partnership worked a lot on energy security. And I believe a lot of civil society organizations will continue working on Green Deal, European Green Deal implementation, which is the priority for the EU itself. But what I understand from the Anna Otilia message, that even if there is no communication, or let's say even we are in a war with Belarus, even there is a real still conflict, war among Armenia and Azerbaijan, probably there should be some communication among civil society, those who are not supported the government there, to create a sort of basis for recovery of these countries when this regime, for example, in Belarus, will change. I think this is quite a separate issue, or let's say very special issue within the Eastern Partnership, and I'm not sure whether it should be Eastern Partnership or Eastern Partnership should be just redesigned, recreated, because in this format, which was described, civil society plays a crucial role, and there are no governments there, and there are no parliaments there, which means that European Commission and DG NEAR will definitely have to rewrite their policy from the scratch. Yes, including the budget. I'm sorry, but this is we also should discuss this. So then there should be totally different program for civil societies in these countries who want to learn from, I don't know, Ukraine, from Moldova, from Georgia, how to better develop than Belarus, for example, when there will be a new regime, or there will after the democratic elections. But again, for the European Commission, it means completely rewrite its vision of so-called Eastern Partnership. And one more argument is that if even a country which has association agreement, you have to deal still with the DG NEAR. Yeah, so you negotiate officially with the DG NEAR. After you receive a candidate status, you switch to the negotiations to the relevant DGs. In our energy case, we start to negotiate, we start to work directly with DG Energy, and the same with other sectors. And again, it means that there will be not so many discussions relevant for DG Neighborhood in terms of energy reforms, integration of markets. There will be more discussions with our relevant counterparts in DG Energy. So again, this is a question: how to rewrite Eastern Partnership, how to maybe create a new form of cooperation at the level of civil society, where we can share experience, we can teach, we can communicate, but again, the format definitely should be changed. And we have to keep our focus as Ukraine on first to win the war, and second to become a member. And we cannot trade this with any other formats of cooperation. Thanks a lot.
Honest, thank you so much. It's quite a good wrap-up of our discussion with the question how to write the Eastern Partnership. Maybe this is a huge question to address even during assembly of the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum in December. But I would like to give the floor to Anna Fortuna, maybe for just looking or just giving us your perspective from what you heard from the discussion. Basically, it was like you possibly to touch the water in Ukraine about our position of Eastern Partnership and about our perception of our role. So what's your take on that? And maybe you can also comment on some issues which are addressed to you as well.
Gennady, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm sorry if I will not touch upon certain things that have been discussed because of the translation issues, but I just wanted to kind of give some final thesis, so to say. I think that what is a common understanding that we all agree upon is that the war and the winning of the war and all the support that would go to Ukraine, it's something that it's an absolute priority. There is no doubt about it. Dependent or independent on the European integration process for Ukraine, the winning of the war, the reconstruction of the country is an absolute must, where everyone should unite the efforts to work hard to get this result. I want this to be extremely clear for everyone that this is an absolute priority, and that is something we've been advocating since the beginning of the war, and we will continue to advocate for. That's number one. The second, Eastern Partnership, I mean, we know that it's going to stay. That is a fact now. We could argue what its advantage, what disadvantage, or we could take it as an opportunity to identify those critical areas where we could still show our added value. In addition to that, what I want to say, and that has always also been clearly expressed, is that the European political community, because I've heard that someone promoted this idea to be more interesting, it is important for you to understand that the EPC is not going to replace the Eastern Partnership. On the contrary, is going to complement it. They've been discussing on the same areas: security, environment, interconnectivity, contact-to-contact people. But the difference between the two is that on the Eastern Partnership, we have a very good structure in engagement with the civil society through the multilateral track, while with the EPC, it's going to stay in the intergovernmental side, which is just a talk and debate between the leaders of the 44 countries. This is important to consider. The second part is that Russia remains a common threat to the region. Even now during the war and even after the war, no one can guarantee that the scenario that is happening today with Ukraine, it's not going to with someone else. So I truly believe that a common approach to a common threat needs to be taken into consideration. We need to react now when it comes to the war, but we also need to build resiliency when it comes to the common aggressor. And as someone of the speakers mentioned, in the civil society, there is a huge expertise on the different dimension. And I truly agree that the Eastern Partnership should be revisited. It needs to be reshaped to fit the purpose, but it doesn't mean we have to cancel it before we have something else in place. It took us more than 10 years to elaborate on a structure that is functional. And again, I go on the civil society side. As someone, and Mikhailko, I think, mentioned, extremely important that having a civil society included in the process when it comes to rule of law, independent judiciary is key and crucial. And we've seen that. I mean, if we go back through the years of the Eastern Partnership, so far we have different poster childs with different things. But if we look also at the result of the EAP index that we just presented this summer, we also know that the country, Ukraine including, is not doing great when it comes to rule of law, judiciary, and anti-corruption. And I'm not saying that we should not support and always praise the good results of a country, especially during wartime. But at the same time, the civil society has a different role. We need to partner with the governments, with all our governments when they do something good, but we also need to remember what is our mission. And this is actually to be a watchdog and make sure that the reforms are done in a proper manner. Speed doesn't mean quality. We also need to take that into account. Of course, we contributed to the questionnaire, but we also need to remember that those questionnaires were almost 1,000 questions less if you compare to the Western Balkans. Then also the Western Balkans are the great example of how not having an official cooperation with the civil society, went into the opposite direction. Where are they today after so many years of getting the candidate status? What I'm trying to say, and I'm not an advocate in the sense that we need to keep EAP at any expense, but the idea we cannot give up of a venue that gives us the opportunity to have a place around the table for the civil society specifically without having something else in place. This is extremely important, and we've been advocating that for years. As you know, the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum has a unique status when it comes to the EAP architecture. We are the only observer having access until the senior official meetings, making sure that the voice of the independent civil society is there. And when I say independent, that is another very important aspect. We need to be independent, we need to sit firm on our things and promote the good reforms if we want them to last. This is extremely important. When it comes to the enlargement, again, as I mentioned already, and I just want to highlight, the enlargement process is an intergovernmental process, which means that it doesn't have the component of the civil society, where I truly believe that the civil society needs to have a place around the table, as Olena mentioned. We cannot be the ambulance only in emergency situation for our governments. We need to have a place on our own and advocate for the things we believe in. I consider this an absolute important, because if we move ahead into the speed we have, which is of course amazing and very much appreciated, we risk to have reforms that are not going to last. And the last thing I want to remember is that the civil society throughout the years has been the constant. The governments have changed, and I'm not saying specifically only with the example of Ukraine. We've seen situation, let's take Moldova. Now it's a fortunate situation when we have a strong European integration focus with a government that is promoting this. There is a dialogue among the different parties within the society. But we had situations when we had an oligarch deciding our fate. We also had the socialists who were strongly pro-Russian, putting at danger the entire European future that the population of that country chose. So what I'm calling you to is to really reflect. Let's try to find opportunities to cooperate, to use all available venues we have to speak up for the things we believe in. Let's not rush and to put, as Otilia mentioned, all the eggs into one basket. This is dangerous and things might change. So let's keep our watchdog role alive as more as possible and contribute and work hard for the rule of law reforms that are absolutely instrumental into getting the democratization and the European values that we all strive for. I will stop here and thank you very much again for the invitation and for having me in these very important discussions.
And thank you so much. It was very important to understand your position and your appeal. I think we share your idea that we should preserve venues for civil society cooperation and for our influence, either on the level of national governments in our countries or on the European level. And basically, it was also mentioned in our discussion from many speakers that we acknowledge that Civil Society Forum was maybe the best institution on multilateral track, which we see it was efficient and influential in our terms. What we are trying to conquer or to discuss at the moment is that we see that Eastern Partnership at large as a policy is not relevant in that way to Ukraine. And basically you mentioned European political community. At the very beginning, there was discussion by Macron how to launch it back in May, but Ukrainian side was quite firm. We will not accept this kind of fora if it runs counter our European perspective in our candidacy. So basically, what we're talking about this reshaping of Eastern Partnership policy, how to make it applicable for our aspirations as for us to be part of the enlargement. At the same time, for others to be part of this neighborhood policy. We're ready to cooperate as civil society, but we still have our objectives to be met. And basically, it was also mentioned by our colleagues that we are ready to get additional expertise on some specific issues and areas. And basically in this vein, I think that Eastern Partnership Forum could be instrumental even for Ukrainian NGOs. So at this moment, I think that we are on the same page with you. And thank you so much for, yet again, I reiterate, for supporting Ukrainian society. It is very important in times of war. And we really think when we prevail, we are to create new bridges with the region and maybe to transfer our experience how to be resilient and how to be more efficient in our reforms track. At this difference, I have to close our discussion because I was said by organizers to close it by 1 p.m. strict. So I think it was quite instrumental discussion for me. Many ideas. I have 3 pages of notes taken during discussion, and I think that we could continue some specific issues during assembly, which will take place in December. I think many of you will take part as delegates from Ukrainian part. Fingers crossed, it will be possible for you to be in person on this event. And I would like to take my appreciation and same appreciation to those speakers who took part in the discussion. Many good ideas, and I think that we still see it is as an interconnected issue, our integration and our victory. With this, many thanks to all of you, to Ukraine National Platform for this good start on conference. And if maybe there is some short remark from Ivan Kulchitsky, I can give the floor. If not, we are going today.
Дякую всім і особливо модератору Геннадію за ефективне проведення першого дня. Я думаю, ми почули багато думок і цей процес буде продовжуватися. Основний фокус: Україна переможе, Україна буде членом Європейського Союзу. Ми будемо разом працювати на користь України. Дякую всім. Слава Україні і до перемоги. Дякую.
Героям слава. Дякую всім учасникам. Було дуже цікаво і будемо співробітничати. Гарного дня.